Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My talk today is about how to make money with free software. But before we get to that, I'm going to talk about a few truths about software that I've recognized over the years that I've been involved with it. I would also like to dedicate this talk to Dennis Ritchie, one of the two people who started the Unix operating system, the person who invented the C language, and gave a lot of other contributions to computer science. He died the same week as Steve Jobs, and while the world was focused on Steve Jobs' death, they barely mentioned Dennis Ritchie. I'd like to point out that Steve Jobs was a brilliant marketing person, a design person, and he created a multi-billion-dollar company called Apple. But Dennis helped to create a multi-trillion-dollar industry by the creation of the C language and the creation of Unix. So here is truth number one. Nobody ever buys a computer. For that matter, they don't buy software either. You know, you don't go into a person's house and see a box of software up on the wall with candles on either side, like a shrine. You know, people don't go around polishing their box of software like they polish their car or something like that. Actually, what people are actually purchasing is a solution to a problem. And even when you play a game, that's a problem, and you're looking for a solution. You're looking for software to help you play that game. So that's the first thing you have to separate, is a concept of buying the tool or getting the solution. And in reality, if people could solve their problem by using 2 tin cans and a string, they would. Truth number 2, computer stores don't really sell computers, or at least these days they don't. You go, you know, when I started off in computers, there were no computer stores. If there had been a computer store, you would need to bring along $2.5 million in your pocket, or have a very big credit card. And you need an 18-wheel tractor-trailer truck to haul your computer away to your house. You need to have 3-phase voltage going in with a power station outside, and you need a 20-ton air conditioner to keep it cool. But today, and then in about 1977 to 1980, the computer stores started to appear, and computers were very expensive. You might spend $13,000 or $15,000 US dollars to buy this PC, which would go on your desk, and all the software that you needed for it. And of course, a lot of times people didn't buy that, but companies did. Now, as the price of the computers kept dropping, the profit margins also started to drop. And the knowledgeable computer person that used to be in the store was replaced by somebody who could help you carry the computer from the back room to the cash register. And this creates a problem, because the place that people used to go for their help to answer their questions was the local computer store. And that has turned into the big box store where nobody knows anything about computers. Or if they do, they're in the back room and you can't talk to them. The thing is, what the stores are selling today is shelf space. They have so much shelf space, and they want to make profit from that shelf space. They could be selling bananas on those shelves. As long as they sold enough to give them profit, it's okay. Now this explains a lot, because when you go into a computer store, you see many, many computers all running Windows. That's because Windows has 90% of the desktop market. So the store owner knows that 9 out of 10 people coming into that store are going to want to buy a Windows machine. Then you might get one person come into the store who wants to buy an Apple machine. And that's why the Apple stand is at the back of the store, or maybe down underneath. You always put the things down underneath. But the other reason that a person is carrying that Apple computer is because when you sell it, you get a lot of profit. Because Apple charges a premium for their products. And that's why, although Apple only has 7% of the desktop computer market, they are one of the most profitable companies on the face of the earth. Now let's have a Linux person come into the store. Well, the very first thing that happens is the Linux person is asking embarrassing questions like, how many cores does a CPU have? What is the disk drive controller in there? Is that compatible with Linux kernel 3.12? Oh, by the way, you have last week's edition of the kernel. What are you, a slough? You're supposed to have this week's edition of the kernel. And the person you're talking to says, what's a kernel? And the thing is, if you have to ask 2 questions from the person who's in the computer store, they're losing money. They want you to go away. If you're a Windows customer, you not only buy the computer, but you buy a box of virus software, you buy games, you buy this and that, you walk away with this big cart. If you're an Apple person, you buy graphics software and stuff like that. If you're a Linux person, you don't buy anything. In fact, you want to get a rebate because you don't want to pay the Microsoft tax. And again, the person who owns the store is not even sure what they're talking about because he didn't pay anything for the Microsoft software on that computer. It just came with it. He doesn't know how much he's supposed to give back to you or even if he can recover that from the people who sold him the computer. That's why you don't see any Linux systems in your stores, because they take up too much shelf space. Truth number 3, support is an oxymoron. In other words, you can't say support in a sentence and say computer at the same time, because it just doesn't exist. Now, back when I started off with computers, you could not touch the computer unless you had a master's degree or a PhD in computer science. And so you were working away. And if you had a question, you'd talk to the person in the next office to you because they also had a master's or PhD in computer science. And then if they couldn't help you, talk to the person on the other side because they also had a master's or PhD in computer. Do you see the process here? We were the ones who were developing the software, not the companies. Therefore, we were the ones who had to be trained to the teeth in the computers. But as time went on, this type of support was moved downstairs to what they called the computer room. And you would go there to have your questions answered about various pieces of software and things like that. And then, after a while, it was moved out to the computer supplier. So you had to call IBM or Hewlett-Packard or Oracle to get your question answered. And then it was moved to China and India and worse yet, West Texas. And none of those people could you understand. Particularly the people in West Texas. How you doing, partner? What time of day is it here? And the reason for this is because there's only 2 people that are involved with buying that support for you. The person who's giving you the support or selling you the support, and they want to hire the least trained, least knowledgeable, lowest paid person they can find. Usually they get them right out of the back door of McDonald's, okay? And they can then offer to you the lowest cost support that they can give. And the other person that's involved is the purchasing agent of your company or the chief financial officer, whoever it is, who never calls the support line. And their sole thing is how inexpensively can they find that support. Now, who's missing from this picture? You, the person who actually is going to be using the support. And that's why you're on the telephone for like half a day with the person saying, is your mouse plugged in? Have you rebooted your system? What are the various versions of the software? And then in the middle of all this, you say, hello. I have a master's degree in computer science and 45 years in the field. I want to talk to somebody who is knowledgeable. Silence, and then, is your mouse plugged in? I once knew a medical doctor who spent 8 hours on the phone trying to get a simple question answered. And you know how much medical doctors charge per hour. So this was like $4,000 of his time trying to get this simple question answered. If you think about the fact that there's 2.5 billion desktop computers in the world today, and that if each one of us wastes 5 reais worth of time, whether getting an answer, or 5 reais worth of time because the software doesn't work the way we think it should, then this means that we're wasting 12.5 billion reais every day as a world economy because the software doesn't work the way it should. That's almost enough to fight a small war in Iraq, I know. Or you could actually inoculate every child on the face of the earth against polio with just 1 day's worth of waste. And we don't really notice this because we lose it 5 reais at a time per person. But let's make it a little easier to envision. We have about, I'd say, 300 people in this room. And I am a person who's hired you all as knowledge workers, and each one of you has a PC in front of you. And you're going to lose 5 reais worth of time because the PC, doesn't work the way you think it should. It has spam in it, viruses in it, whatever. It's like this entire row of people vanishes. It's like they never came into work. And if I'm a manager of this group, I am ripped because these people didn't call in sick. They didn't go on vacation. They're not on training. They just never showed up. I would be beside myself. I'd fire each one of them. But I can't because they're actually sitting there. It's just they're not doing anything productive because their computer isn't working like it should. I can't blame them. But let's say I took one of them and made them a local systems administrator that could go around and say, oh, I see your disk is failing. I'm going to repair it before it fails. I see that there's virus attacking your system. I'm going to fix it before it makes you lose your work. And all of a sudden, magically, 6 people show up again because now the computers are working the way they should. Why doesn't the whole row show up? Because it's an imperfect world. And even with the systems administrator doing his best, we might not be able to get 100%, but we'd be able to get a lot. And so support is something that's very important. And we're having a hard time getting a lot of these managers to understand this. I talk with IT managers, in information, chief technical officers, chief information officers, and they think of the systems administrator as what they call an expense item. It's something we have to tolerate because we need them. They don't think of them as the asset which they actually are. This is something we have to fix. Truth number 4, wireless bandwidth is not unlimited. Now, how many of you remember when Apple brought out the first iPhone? In the United States, it was a big thing. They went along with AT&T, which was the largest telephone company in the world, had a nice cellular network, and they released it in New York City. And everybody got their iPhone, they started it up, and all of a sudden, the AT&T network just went pew down like this. Nobody could make a telephone call. And AT&T was very embarrassed because this went all over that AT&T's network was terrible. That wasn't the problem. The problem was everybody found out that they could download porn. Now you know that the internet, the major use of the internet is to download porn. Okay? So it's very easy. And, so AT&T very busily went in, put in more cell towers, things like that. And then all of a sudden, Apple came out with the next iPhone. It was faster, it had a bigger bandwidth, and they could download porn faster than ever. And the only way you could make a telephone call was to go from 3G back to 2.5G so you could actually get a telephone call, which is what the phone was supposedly for. And so this brings about Hall's Law, which says that no matter how much bandwidth you give to people, they will find a way to download more porn to the extent of that. And we're now coming into 3D porn, and heaven knows what's going to happen when we have smell-a-porn, okay? They always want to do that. So what you have to do is you have to keep making your cells smaller and smaller. So I can take the same bandwidth that could treat this whole room, I just deliver it to these 3 people right here because they have a little cell that's all their own. And they can really download porn really fast. That's the only way. And the problem is that you have all these people who have buildings, they don't like antennas on the top of their buildings. They don't want to have that. So we have a problem. And all these people that go around saying, oh, wireless is every place, the internet is every place, they do not live in northern New Hampshire. I can tell you. Because in northern New Hampshire, you're still using 9,600 bit per second dial-up lines. And people curse you when you stick a PDF file, you attach a PDF file to your email. Truth number 5. Most people hate computers. How many of you like computers? You're strange. You are of a definite minority. Because you go out there and you talk with your parents, just sidle up to them a little bit, okay? Don't hit them right off the bat, but because they know you're in computer science, they're going to be a little wary of talking to you. Just say, Mom and Dad, do you like using your computer? The answer will be, no! They hate using computers because of all the reasons I gave you before. They don't work the way they're supposed to. They're confusing. They keep changing all the time because all these people are downloading bugs as well as porn. But we are strange because we like these for some reason. We like the challenge of keeping them going. And so most people avoid computers. But what would happen if we made computers that they really could use? And there was somebody, our local systems administrator, that they could go to when there was a question and get it answered quickly so they could go back and start doing their work. There was, in the past, a golden time of computers. It was called time sharing. You had a big computer in the basement, and you had little lines that went up to terminals on people's desk. You went in, you logged into your terminal on your desk, and you just did your job. And there was a person named an operator who took care of your data, did backups and things like that, installed new software for you. It was wonderful. And then along came Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, put a mainframe computer on everybody's desk. They called it a PC, but they were lying. It was a mainframe computer. And they said, good luck, sucker, and left. We can't bring back those golden days because people have gotten used to their cell phones and wireless porn and stuff like that. But we can make sure that they have a local systems administrator that can help them out and make a job out of it. Truth number 6, computers are not intuitive if I hear one more person say that Apple is intuitive, Apple is easy to use, and stuff like that, I'm going to bop them right in the face. Apple is consistent. There is a definition of the Apple interface that everybody follows. This is the way a scroll bar works. It always works this way on Apple. This is the way you interchange data between Apple programs. And Apple enforces this religiously. So when you learn one program on an Apple computer, you learn all of them. That's great. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. But it also hampers innovation of somebody coming out with something better, because unless Apple approves of it, it doesn't show up. Okay? That's a problem. And there's some other problems. But they're not, it's not that Apple systems are intuitive, because if they were, as soon as you came out of the womb, you'd be able to use the Apple, because that's intuition. Okay? They're not intuitive. Please don't say that. It just gets me mad. And truth number 7, there's no absolute truths. Somebody asked me today, you said that universities are not teaching the lower orders things. I said, no. I said, some of them aren't. A lot of them aren't. But there are exceptions to that. And there are exceptions to all of my truths, which I just gave you. And every time somebody comes up to you and says, this is absolutely true, you have to sit there and balance it out with what you know of the rest of the world. And when somebody comes up to you and says, the cloud will be the future of computing, wireless will be every place, this is the year of the Linux desktop, you can balance this with what you know is true in the world. So you have to separate marketing from common sense. Now, let's go to the second part of the talk, which is how we're going to talk about making money with free software. There's 3 parts to the talk, by the way. First, the definition of what we mean by free software is the freedom to use the software for any purpose. When I first started getting involved with Linux, there was a lot of people who said, I'm not going to let people make money off of the software that I give away for free. Other people said, I'm not going to let the government use my software. Other people said, I'm not going to, And we realized that by the time we went through all of these Venn diagrams of people who could not use the software, you ended up with nobody using the software. So you have to go into it with the philosophy that the tool does not make evil. The people that use the tool may be evil. But you have to take that as a chance. Because you can kill a person with a hammer, or you can build a house. It's what you want to do with the hammer. So you have to be able to use the code for any reason. You have to be able to make changes to source code to make it fit your need. And this is probably one of the biggest advantages of free software, because it puts the control of the software back in your hands instead of the hands of a company like Microsoft or Oracle or any other closed source company. Now, a lot of times people have a problem when you use the word freedom. Certainly George W. Bush had that problem. So a while back I stopped talking about freedom and I started talking about slavery, because people have a much greater idea of what a slave is. When you're a slave, you're owned by somebody. You don't own anything. When you're a slave, you're told where to go, what to do, who to marry, when to have children. And the children aren't yours, they belong to the massa. When you're a software slave, you're told what to install on your machine. You don't own it. You can only use it for a period of time. You're told how many people can use it, what machines it can go on, when to upgrade it, and when you have to go to the next version. This is not freedom. This is slavery. And I, myself, do not want to be a software slave. And people say to me, well, Mad Dog, I don't have the ability to change the software. I don't have the ability to do brain surgery. But I have the right and the ability to go in and ask somebody else to do it for me. I don't have to ask Microsoft, can I have brain surgery? They probably would like me to have brain surgery, but that's different. So you can make a business decision of using the software the way it is, or paying somebody to make the fix for you so that you can go on with whatever you're doing. That's your decision, not the decision of somebody else. So that's the freedom. And the one thing that even Richard Stallman has never said, Richard Stallman has never said that you should not be able to make money using free software. In fact, if you go to the free software pages, in the web pages, you will find a page that talks about the fact that they encourage you to make money with free software. It's just that after you've written the software, it should be free. Slight difference there. You'll see what I mean later on. I'd like to introduce you to a few people. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I usually pick out one or two to talk about. I'll talk about this guy in the upper right-hand corner. His name is Eric Drowan. He is one of the 3 people who started Red Hat Software. He was actually an English history major who happened to be interested in computers. And they started Red Hat, they got it to a certain point, they sold it off in what is known as an IPO, and today he is a multi-millionaire for selling free software. This person right here, wait a minute, no, yeah, I'm hitting the wrong button, there we go. That person, his name is Nick Walker. I first met Nick when he was 15 years old. He had started programming at the age of 9, was hacking the Linux kernel at the age of 12, writing device drivers for the Linux kernel at the age of 15, and his father, who had a computer company, was paying him $40,000 US a year to write device drivers for him because Nick was worth it. He had finished all the courses he could take at high school, but he was too young to go to college, so he wrote device drivers for a few years. But then he went to Simon's Rock School of Bard, which is a college for young people. And he didn't join the college. Instead, he became their network administrator, rewired their entire network. He met the person who did the special effects for Star Wars and was helping him with the next generation of special effects. When he met this young lady, as most people do, and traveled out to the West Coast to live with her, he's working with the University of Washington on PhD level projects. Did I mention he never graduated from high school? But he studied free software. I'll talk about this person last. Or maybe him. Mark Spencer, yes. Mark was running a software support company out of his dormitory room in college. He had several students working with him in kind of a cooperative arrangement. And he decided he needed a piece of equipment which is known as a private branch exchange. It's basically a telephone switching network that also supplies you services like voicemail, things like that. He found out they cost between $20,000 and $30,000 US. He said, I don't have that type of money, so I'll write my own. And he wrote a piece of software called Asterisk, which is a software, free and open source software package that could take an inexpensive PC and turn it into a PBX. Now, this is free software. You can pull it down off the net. You can use it for free. And they do. People do. Thousands of people around the world pull the software down, put it on a PC, and sell this PBX and services to end-user customers without even having to say anything to Mark whatsoever. But Mark did form a company called Digium, which sells services on this and sells hardware. And he's now a multi-millionaire. Actually, it's hundreds of multi-millions that he has. And finally, this guy right here comes from Spain. I met him when he was 15. At the age of 12 and a half, he had started his own distribution. It was the only distribution that used facial recognition so you could log in. By the time I met him, he had 20,000 customers, and his father, who had worked for IBM for 30 years, was now working for him. All the other people in his company were also 15 years old. And he's traveled all over the world because Campus Party likes to have him to inspire other young people to what they can do. Now, every single one of these people, none of them ever went to university to study computer science. All of them learned what they knew about computer science from studying the code of open source. All of them made, well, except for, he hasn't quite made his hundreds of millions of dollars yet. He's on his way. That guy right there comes from South Africa. It's a much longer story. He's not a multimillionaire. But the rest of these people are up in the multi-millions of dollars for selling free software. So, how do I make money with free software? Well, you have to ask yourself, how do you make money with proprietary software if your name isn't Bill Gates or Larry Ellison or one of the others? Well, you're creating solutions for customers. Or maybe you're a systems administrator using that software to build a system for people, and you're paid as a systems administrator to do that. Or you're an educator who's educating people on how to use the software, or educating people on how to build the solutions for the systems. But remember, it's the solution that's important, not the software. Each of these is easier and cheaper and faster to do with free software than it is with proprietary software. Because when you try and get proprietary software to work together, it's like taking two rods made of glass and gluing them. The glue has nothing to stick to. So you put the glue in there, you stick them together, you let it dry, and just a little bit of pressure, it'll break. But if you take a piece of sandpaper and rough up the edges of the glass to give the glue something to stick to, then you glue them together, and then you've got a real bond. The same thing is true of software. Unless you have really well-defined interfaces, you can't get the software to work well together. One little mistake in the interface, and the two programs don't work. With proprietary software, you have to wait for the people who made those pieces of software to fix it for you. With free software, you can fix it yourself. Free software is a business like any other. You have to go into it as a business. You have to know what your market is. You have to know what you're doing for them. Very important phrase. What is the value which you add to the solution? If you can't state that, then you don't have a business. Notice I didn't say anything about compilers, operating systems, languages, or anything like that. I'm talking business. And you need to know that. Who are your competitors? What's the value of you above them? What's your marketing plan? Do you think just because you wrote a piece of code that the world is going to come to your doorstep? That's craziness. Oh, I'll put up a website. Oh, that's good. A website is the worst possible thing because it gives you this false sense of security that people are going to come to your website, when in reality you have to drive people to your website. You need to have a marketing plan for your software and a financial plan. How do you get to the point where you actually have enough money, enough revenue coming in to sustain yourself? If you can't get to that point, your business is out of business. You are bankrupt. You need to be able to understand cash flow. And you need to have an exit strategy. Do you really want to spend your entire life being 65 years old, still working on the same game? Or would you rather spend 10 years doing that, sell it for $50 million, grab your money and run? I'd rather do the other one, because I got a boat in the South Pacific, right? So, why do people write free software? When I started programming in 1969, I actually had a university professor tell me, "John, you'll never make a living as a professional programmer." I'm still trying to figure out if he was right. I still have 4 more years before I retire. Maybe he was right. Maybe I won't get there. But back in those days, you didn't have professional programmers. You had physicists who did programming. You had electrical engineers who did programming. You had mathematicians who did programming, chemists who did programming, weather forecasters, pornographers. No. They did programming. There was no computer science degree. And so these people wrote the software because they needed it for their own work. And after they wrote the piece of software, they said, what am I going to do with this? You know, because selling software is hard work. And they were not in the business of selling software. They were physicists and engineers. So they gave it away. And they gave it away in source code form because they hoped that somebody else would help make it better. Because after all, you find one more person who's interested in your software and can help you make it better, you've doubled the size of your engineering staff. 100% growth! Wow! One more person, not quite as good, you know, only 33% better growth, but it's not bad. So other people might make it better. And you know, and you go to a meeting or something and somebody says, hey, I really like that software you did. Let me buy you a beer. Or let me buy you dinner. Or let me give you a job. And these are all the reasons why we write free software today. And the people that did take their software beyond that had a business model that was based around service to people. They not only knew how to write software, but they also knew something about physics. Or they knew something about mathematics. And they could talk to the other physicists and the other mathematicians. Why do people pay other people to write free software? If you go out to SourceForge or GitHub, you find out that there are hundreds of thousands of packages of free software out there ready for you to pull down and use. And you go there, databases of all types, you know, scientific libraries, business models, and business software. Why would people pay somebody? It's because they want a small change. Or they want to know that there's somebody they can come to and ask questions of when they need help. Or they need to have it in their time frame. Because in the business world, time is money. There used to be a comic strip called Far Side. And one of my favorite comics of Far Side showed this old man standing in front of this whiteboard with all these calculations on it. He had a white lab coat, his hair was all frizzy. And at the end of the equations, there was a dollar sign. And it said, the day that Einstein understood that time was really money. Time is money. And the business is very important to the business person. And a lot of these people say, hey, there's no reason why I shouldn't share this change with everybody, even my competitors, because this is not something that differentiates me from my competitors. So why shouldn't I let the whole world have the advantage of this? They want a feature that's not likely to be written in the near future by somebody else. It's specific to their business. And they know that by putting this out into free software, that the next time that software is released, it'll automatically have that feature in it. If they keep it to themselves, it means that the next time that software is released, they have to work that change back in. And that will cost them more time and money. So this is why they pay people to write free software. Now, a lot of people in the world today will say that operating systems are commodities. Nobody cares about the operating system anymore. Bull crap. Because I know people who sit there with a stopwatch and say, oh, your operating system only gives me 10,000 transactions per second, and this one gives me 9,999. I'm going to buy yours. That's the type of things they have. Or they're looking at the stability of the software. How much does it stay up? But people got into this thing of commodity software back in the 1977 to 80 because they said, maybe we can stamp out computers like cookies. Maybe we can do the same thing with software. That 70 to 80% of the market will have 70 to 80% of their needs satisfied. Not 100% of the market. This software doesn't work in Africa, doesn't work in Czechoslovakia, doesn't work, they need something different. So we're not going to worry about them. Their market is too small. It's not in our best business interest to support them. Screw them, okay? They don't really say screw them, but it is screw them. And we're not going to try and do all of the features that people want. We might do those in the next release or future release, but of course we never get around to doing that. So now do the math. 70% of the market times 70% of the needs, it's less than half the needs of the world. And we're trying to solve this with commodity software. Let me tell you what a real commodity is. It's a can of corn. You go to the supermarket, there's 5 cans of corn on the shelf. One is green, I don't know if you have these brands here, but we have these in the United States. Green Giant. Ho, 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 Green Giant. Well-known brand. People pay lots of money for it. Then there's Del Monte. Yeah, Del Monte, it's okay. A few cents less. Then you have the supermarket corn. Food Club, whatever. It's okay. Then you have the generic corn. The white label with the barcode on it. Okay? That's really pretty cheap. But the real one is the corn that's generic with a dent in it. The dented can. Oh, you look for those because they're like half price. Right? But you know something? It's all the same corn. It's probably canned by the same company. They just put different labels on it. So when you go into the store and you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out which can of corn you're going to buy, after a while, the owner of the store comes and says, "Can I help you?" And you turn to him and say, Can I feed my whole family with that can of corn? Can I take these 2 cans of corn and mix them together, or do I have to cook them in a separate pot?" By the time you've asked the second question, the owner of the store is calling over the bouncer, the guard, to throw you out because you are crazy, because it's corn. It's a commodity. But let's look at a car. A car gives everybody transportation. All cars have a steering wheel, a brake, a gas pedal. Some have a clutch with a stick shift. Some are automatic. But nobody takes a suitcase full of money down to the car lot and says, "Give me any car on the lot, I don't care." Maybe if you're Bill Gates. He just buys one and throws it away at the end of the driveway. But if you're not Bill Gates, you spend a lot of time. Is the car big enough to hold my family? Is it safe? Does it give good gas mileage? Can it pull my boat? All these things are very important because cars are not a commodity, even though every car gives transportation. So that's the same thing with software. Software is not a commodity because you want to know a lot of things about it. And in the 45 years I've been in the computer industry, I've never seen 2 business problems that are the same. They're like snowflakes. They're all different. And if they're different, how can we solve different business problems with commodity software? Something has to change. Now, the software companies love commodity software. They hire a few engineers, they generate the software, and then they put them onto CDs or floppy disks and manufacture them like cookies. What else happens the same way? We take a piece of paper, we put some ink on it, and we call it a real. Right? It's the same thing. The software companies are minting money. It's just its ones and zeros on a plastic disc. That's a problem. There's a slight problem here because you don't have to have any support to tell you how to spend money. You know, everybody knows how to spend money. Money is a commodity. Software is not. And the problem comes as you grow larger and larger. Once upon a time, there was this little company close to my house, and I purchased a piece of software from them. It was closed source. It came on 8-inch floppy disks. I paid $1,000 US for it. I found a problem. I called them up. I got the president of the company on the line. I told him what the problem was. He says, "Oh yes, I know what that is." And he could say that because he was the chief programmer. He says, "You know, I think we can fix that this morning and we can test it in QA this afternoon, quality assurance this afternoon." And he could say that because he was the head of quality assurance. He says, "If we do that, I think we can get it out in this evening's mail and you'll have it tomorrow morning." And he could say that because he was the head of shipping. And sure enough, the next day I got 2 8-inch floppy disks and my problem was solved. Today, you call up the same company. Back in those days, they had 1,000 customers. Today, they have 3.4 million customers. The software doesn't cost $1,000 anymore. It costs $29.95. You get it down at your local PC store. But when you call them up, you don't get the president on the line anymore, nor do you get the chief programmer, nor do you get the head of quality assurance, nor do you get the shipping clerk. What you get is, "Please press button number 1 for sales, button number 2 for support." Boop! And then you get music, 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 and then you get disconnected. And it's not because these companies don't want to give you good service, it's because they can't give you good service. They have too many customers with too many needs, too diversified. They cannot do it. How many of you know the telephone number for Google? They don't have one, do they? How about the email address of the QA manager at Google? You won't find an email address any place on Google's site, not even under Gmail, because they don't want you to send them email. You may find a little web form someplace that says, "Type in your problem here." That immediately goes to dev null. Okay. That's the bit bucket for people that are not Unix people. Now let's talk about something you hear all the time: total cost of ownership. A certain company whose name I won't mention, except it sounds a lot like Microsoft, will tell you that closed source, that open source software, free software, actually costs more in total cost of ownership than their code does. And their rationale is that even though you buy their code, it's cheaper and easier to find people who know about Microsoft to give you support. And these people charge you less money for your support. So I said, "Help me with this, Microsoft." What you're saying is, if you are a Microsoft support person and you are a Linux support person, that you can charge more per hour for your services than she can get because there's so many more of her and there's so few of you. So you're telling me it's better to be a Linux support person because you make more per hour for your services. Microsoft says, no, that's not what we said. Yes, it is, Microsoft. And to university professors, this is a calling to say you should be training people on how to do open source work because they will make more money than the people who are taking care of closed source work. Oh, that's good news to know. But in any case, it doesn't make any difference. But I'll tell you why it doesn't make any difference. Because if you can't afford the solution, you're already at zero. So after you can afford the solution, you now look at the next thing. And the next thing is return on investment. I have 10 reais for this problem or 10 reais for that problem. Which one is going to give me the most money back for that 10 reais investment? That's what you need to look at. Once you pass total cost of ownership, you can afford the solution. You have to look at what does this give me back? And free software will give you back a better solution which will make you more money than a closed source solution. I can back that up. So like I said, and most people don't want a product. I hate cars. I actually do. Because cars, I'm not into the drive the car very fast thing. What I want is transportation. I come out of my house in the morning in the city, the limousine is waiting for me. I go downstairs, hello Ralph. Ralph opens the door for me. I get in the back seat. I open up my briefcase. As Ralph drives through the heavy city traffic, I'm working on stuff, making calls and things like that. I get to the office. Ralph opens up the door for me. I go inside. Ralph takes the car off to gas it up and wash it and things like that. No, I don't really have a limousine, but this is what I would do. I take the taxi cab. It's the same thing. But I have transportation. That's what I want. Some people love cooking food. I hate cooking food. You know, some people like buying the food, going to the store, picking the food out, taking it home, washing it. I hate that. I love the service of food. I go to the restaurant, there's Ralph, it's on his second job. He greets me, he says, your wine, sir? Yes, my normal wine, okay. And I have the table all set up for you. Would you like your normal, what is a special? Yes, there is. Okay, I'll take that. You know, a service of food. I don't have to wash the dishes or anything. I just pay the money. That's what I want. And some people say, well, service, you know, that's like cooking hamburgers or sweeping the street or something like that. No, it's not. It's service like a brain surgeon. A brain surgeon doesn't create a product. You don't end up with a second brain when you get done. Oh yeah, I got a new brain. It works really good. But oh, you don't know. The surgeon fixes the brain that you've got. It's a service. But you don't go around looking for advertisements to say, oh, I do brain surgery cheap. I use last year's CAT scan machine. I don't wash my instruments after every surgery. You look for the best brain surgeon you can find because your brain is important to you. Business people, their business is very important to them. Most of the time they say, you can take my brain, but leave my business. And they pay you a lot of money. Lawyers, God knows lawyers don't produce anything useful, but we still value their expertise and we pay them for it, okay? They're not just packaged software installers. And actually, 80% of all the software written is not packaged software. It's not Oracle, it's not Microsoft Office, it's not Microsoft operating systems. It's systems administrators writing code. It's specialized applications, embedded systems writing code. And this is going to actually increase over the next few years as the price of individual little computers come down and people want to have them do very special things. So let's take a look at the jobs that you can have with free software, and you can charge money for all of them. It's the same list as you have for proprietary software, with the fact that you can now change all the software that you need to solve the problems. That's how you make money with free software. In Rio de Janeiro, there was a small company. They wanted to investigate the rainforest of Brazil for new materials, new medicines, things like that. But the software to help them do that is known as Geographic Information Software, GIS. And the main company that makes that is a company named Esri. Now, there's two types of proprietary software in the world. There's expensive proprietary software, and there's really expensive proprietary software. And Esri is the second one, okay? And they charge they did charge $500,000 per copy for what the company needed, and they needed 9 copies. That wasn't the problem. They had the 4.5 million US dollars. But the problem was that Esri only came in English, and the little people in the company only spoke Portuguese. Can you imagine that? Somebody that could not speak English. So the little company went to Esri and said, for $4.5 million, couldn't you make a copy that would prompt us in Portuguese so that we could use it? And Esri said, and remember this phrase, I told you to remember this. What is the phrase? Can you guess what the phrase is? Not in our best business interest. You'll hear it over and over again, okay? It meant that the market was so small, they thought, for Portuguese GIS software that they weren't willing to do it. So the little company went to an open source person, and they said, we don't need all of the functionality of Esri. We just need this little bit. Can you duplicate this with free software? And the person said, yes, I can use OpenGIS to gather the information. I can use Postgres to store the data. I can use GNU plot to make the maps. I can use Python to pull it all together, or Perl to pull it all together. And for 380,000 US dollars and 3 months worth of work, he created a package that was useful to them. Now, at this point, I asked people what they think the value of the software was. The total cost of ownership was $380,000. What was the value of the software? And some people will say, well, the value was $380,000 because that's what the programmer asked. Other people will say it was $4.5 million because that's what the company would have paid Esri for software they couldn't use. And the answer is the software was infinitely valuable because without it, the little company couldn't exist. These are types of things you have to think about when you're pricing your services and your... How many of you have made $380,000 in 3 months? That's what I thought, slackers. St. Petersburg, Russia. What you're looking at is something known as a turbine test bed. If you're a mechanical engineer, you would instantly know what that was. But what you do is you take a steam turbine and you put it in there to test the efficiency of the steam turbine. And if your steam turbine is not very efficient, you redesign it and you test it. And some people say, oh, well, can't you calculate that? Well, you can. But you do it typically for the first turbine. And then you take the steam out of that, you feed it to the second turbine, and the steam out of that to the third turbine, until finally, the only thing that comes out is water. And that is a very hugely complex problem that until recently we could not simulate with mathematics. So you made your turbine, you stuck it in there, and you measured its efficiency with all sorts of sensors. Now, there are 5 turbine test beds in the world. 4 of them use proprietary software that's very expensive. And if you need a change made to it, it takes maybe a month or 2 months to make a simple change to the software. The 3rd turbine test bed in St. Petersburg uses Linux. And he wrote all of his software storing his data in MySQL, using GNU plot to plot out the answers and stuff for the engineers, using Tickle TK to draw diagrams showing where he put his sensors so the engineers could find out. And he's basically less costly than the other turbine test beds and more flexible. And if you're an engineer who says, I'd like to have one little change made, he can typically do that overnight. So with the engineer being the end customer, who gets the better service? The people using proprietary software or the people using free software? Sao Paulo, very close to home. The Sao Paulo subway system was very dirty. And he had no money for subway cleaners. But he was paying $400,000 a year to Microsoft for Microsoft Office. So he decided to use OpenOffice instead of Microsoft Office, and he saved his $400,000, and he hired 17 subway cleaners, who then went through cleaning the subways. And after a while, the subways were much cleaner, and people said, hey, I'm going to start riding the subways more, which raised his revenue, which allowed him to hire more subway cleaners. And after a while, the subways were very clean, and people would come up to him and thank him for how clean the subways were. He said to me, Mad Dog, nobody ever thanked me for how wonderful my letters were for writing on Microsoft. But I do have people who tell me how nice it is to go into clean subways. Here's an example of a redirection of funds away from paying for proprietary software and funneling it into something that people really do care about. Caixa Econômica Federal. You've heard of them, right? They run the lottery system. And they used to use proprietary software to run the lottery system. It would take them 9 months to come up with a new game in the lottery system. So they switched to all free software. They hired 3 programmers, and they found out that they could implement a new game in 3 weeks instead of 9 months. Now, do you know how much money you make when you have a new lottery game in a country of 194 million sporting, lottery-crazy people? You make a lot of money. No. You make a lot of money. No. You make a lot of money. So here, it is not the benefit, the return on investment is the quickness that you can turn around a new lottery game. That's how you measure it. And by the way, those 3 programmers, they were paying R$1 million a month to the company for maintaining the proprietary software. Those three programmers didn't make anywhere near $1 million, R$1 million a month, so they saved money there too. Here's something you could be in the free software market, what we call a value-added reseller. You go and you buy the hardware and you put together a solution for the customer. If you do not have to use some of your money that you're being paid for the solution to buy software from other companies, you get to put that money in your pocket as more profit. Or you can lower your costs to compete better with your competition and still make as much profit as they would. So these are another reasons for using free software in solving solutions. I have some people who actually took closed source software and made it open source, gave it away, and they made more money than ever. One of them is project.net. You can go, and it exists today. You can see it. It is a project management system. It used to be closed source. They sold for $2,000 a copy. They sold 2 copies every month. This was not enough sales to keep the company going. a friend of mine bought the company. He noticed that 60% of the people who bought the product bought some type of support, training, classes, or support contract. So he said to himself, what would happen if I gave away the software? And not only that, but made all the source code available. He did that, and 2,000 people a month pulled down his software. And 60% of them bought a support contract. And he made much more money than ever. Another person had a piece of software that was closed source, and he was spending all of his time porting it from one operating system to another. So what he did was make most of the software open source and kept parts of it as closed source proprietary modules. If little companies pulled down his software, he said, congratulations, use it, I'm happy you're using it, because they never would have bought it from him in the first place. They're kind of like Brazilians. They wouldn't have paid for it. But when the government pulled it down, or the military pulled it down, or the bank pulled it down, he would then call them up and say, I see you using my free software. Would you like to buy these proprietary modules that'll help you use it better? And they said, sure, it's worth it to us. And he made more money than ever. Here's what you should not do. I had this person come up to me one time at a conference and said, I hate your guts. I says, really? Why? He says, I listened to what you said and I'm bankrupt. I says, really? What do you think I said? He says, you told me to create free software and I make lots of money. So I went out, I borrowed a lot of money, I hired a lot of engineers, I created the product, I made it open source, I gave it away, and nobody paid me for it. And now I owe a lot of money to this bank, and I'm bankrupt. I says, I never told you to do that. I says, the first thing I told you, and I told all of you tonight, have a business plan. How are you going to make money with your free software project? That's the first thing you should do. We've been talking about open software for a long time. I'd like to talk a little bit about open hardware. Now, this is much easier for people to understand than free software, because hardware, they know when you take it away from somebody, they don't magically have the same copy. But what we're talking about is that the specifications of the hardware are completely open and available to software programmers. So we no longer have to have binary blobs in the middle of our free software. And the specifications are open so that other people who are knowledgeable about hardware can give their ideas and their thoughts to making the hardware better. This is an open and coming situation. Some examples of that are the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi, which you're probably familiar with, but there's a whole series of other hardware like that. And so what this is creating is a whole series of inexpensive embedded system projects that university students can use to bring new ideas and new services to people. So a challenge for this region and for this university is to create a contest for ideas for products. And once you have people vote on the best ideas, you form into groups to create these. And then you open it up to manufacturing companies to manufacture these, to create manufacturing jobs here in this state, in this company, in this country, rather than in Taiwan or the United States or Western Europe. Even though the student today has virtually little money, when you go out to the internet, you find out that you can create a free education. And as a university student here, you can accelerate your education immensely by going out and taking advantage of these free educational experiences. You can use that to develop a portfolio of programs that you write. Now, if you went to work as an exchange student at Microsoft, you might work on the Microsoft kernel. You might work on the Microsoft operating system, or their compilers, or Microsoft SQL. But they will not let you take that source code, put it into a portfolio to show other people how well you code. If you work on a free software project or with a company that does free software, they'll let you take the software that you write, put it in that portfolio, and show it to other people. You'll be able to take prospective employers and say, look at the mailing list of that project. You can see the email that I sent. You can see how I worked with the other people. You can see the ideas that I put forth. This is my portfolio of work that you can do with open source and you can't do with closed source. You can ask for letters of recommendation from the people in the project. How was I to work with? And you can show all of this. And likewise, you should give praise to the other people in the group. Hey, great group to work with. I really appreciated doing that. Then they will come back and be retrospective to you. Mark Shuttleworth, when he started to get interested in Linux, took the entire mailing list of the Debian project on a notebook down to Antarctica. He spent 9 months in Antarctica looking over the mailing list, seeing who had good ideas, seeing who did good code, seeing who had good submissions. And when he came back, he said, I want you and you and you to come work with me on Canonical, on Ubuntu. He didn't have to call any human relations people. He didn't have to call any employment agency. He already knew who he wanted. Closed source interns don't get a chance to do that. In fact, if you do research with closed source companies, you might not even be able to publish the results of your research because the software you used and that you created is intertwined with them. Here's a tip for you. If you want to form a company to do support, don't do it by yourself. Go out and form a cooperative. Get together with a couple of other people you know and share the resources of salespeople, legal people, things like that. You create a Rolodex of people, index of people who have other needs and skills that you need for your customers. But you share the profits of that. And that way you don't have the profits going to some shareholders who haven't contributed anything to the company for a long time. Because you have multiple people in your company, there's somebody who can take over if you want to go on vacation or if you get sick or something like that. So a cooperative is a very good way of starting your own company. When you start to write your code, prototype, prototype, prototype. One of the things you learn as a Unix person is always be willing to throw away what you've already written if something better comes along. And test it, test it, test it. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard an engineer say, I never expected anybody to use my code that way. There's 7 billion people on the face of the planet. They're going to use your code anyway, except the way you thought they'd use it. Don't be afraid to fail. Everybody fails. There are venture capitalists in California that will not lend you money unless you failed at least twice. They say, well, you failed twice, you probably know your mistakes by now. Find case studies of people who have done good work with free software. You can look in Linux magazines, on the website. You can go to companies and see how they solve problems with free software. And you can duplicate that for your customers. Use the right words. Don't talk about the glory of looking at source code to your customer because they don't care. Talk about saving money and making money. That's what they're interested in. talk about control. That's the missing word. They have control over their business. They have control over their software. In the old days, if all of the computers stopped, we could still run business with calculators and things like that. We can't do that anymore. You need to have control of your software. And if you lose that, you've lost control of your business. Don't be religious, be pragmatic. If you can't find a free software solution, use a closed source solution. Richard Stallman will hate me for saying that, but I'm sorry, Richard. My job is to get the customer's job done. It is hard, it's not easy. There's no magic bullet here. That's why they call it work. But it can also be a lot of fun. And in the 45 years I've been in the industry, I can honestly say there's not a single day that I've been bored. Every day has been exciting, even this last week with you. And it's been fun. So in summary, yes, it's great you're here studying computer science, but you really should learn something about business too. The good news is it's a lot easier to take a technical person and teach them business than it is to take a business person and teach them technology. Because they don't have the math, they don't have the science, it's confusing to them. But you've been doing business ever since you came out of the womb. You've been marketed to, you've had to buy things, you know what money is, you know that stuff. You just have to apply it. Learn from the other free software projects that are out there. Take a look at what they've done and how they failed or succeeded. And then determine your business area. Finally, write that business plan. You don't have to stick with it. It will change over time. It's okay. But without the plan, you'll lose your focus. You need to focus on what you're doing. And the plan will help you do that. I'd like to take just a couple more minutes for Project Kawa. Project Kawa is a project I've been working on for the last 8 years. This is my mother and father. They died about 2 years ago. They've been married for 69 years. They could not use computers, okay? They were befuddled by them. So I wanted to find out a way of helping them with their computers. I started thinking about this in 2007 when somebody came to me and said, "Mad Dog, how can I make money with free software?" And in 2010, I was joined by a Brazilian named Douglas Conrad, who owns a company called OpenS in Florianopolis. He's been working with me. The goals of Project Kawa are to create millions of jobs. People go, "Oh, Mad Dog, how in the world can you? Millions? That's craziness." No, it's not. I can do it. I can show you how we can do it. But millions of jobs, 1 to 2 million jobs in Brazil, with another 3 to 4 million jobs in the rest of Latin America. We want to make computers easier to use. Notice I didn't use the word easy. Easier. A little easier. Just like Richard Stallman will never be happy. He'll only be happier. He will never reach nirvana, but that's okay. He's done great work, okay? Create more environmentally friendly computing. It's ridiculous that we keep throwing our computers out every 2 to 3 years. We need to be better than that. To decrease cellular wireless contention. In other words, to be able to download porn even faster and still be able to talk. And to create a gratis wireless Wi-Fi bubble. You know, it's pretty nice here on campus. I can just start my phone up. I can find the SSID. I can log in with the right password and stuff, and it almost always works. But that's not good enough. Because as you walk down the street, you find out that there's hundreds of SSIDs, but they're all locked. This is craziness. You know, you should be able to pull your phone out, turn it on, and instantly be on the internet. This is the way that God and Al Gore intended the internet to be used. We have found a way of doing that. And at the same time, we're going to create either gratis or very low-cost supercomputers to be able to allow university students to have access to millions of cores at one time. And to do all of this through sustainable private sector funding. In other words, no money from the government. Now, I have nothing wrong with taking money from the government. Hey, just shovel it into my pocket. It's okay. But the government has this problem that every once in a while they switch governments. And not only that, you guys are going into elections right now. I know that between now and election, everything stops. Nobody gives any money for anything because they're afraid that the next government is not going to like it. So you can't do anything. And this is craziness because you can't do this. You have to keep going. That's why the private sector is so important. Make money. It's wonderful. So how do we do this? We're not going to create one company with millions of employees. We're going to create millions of companies with one employee, or maybe two. And it's going to be you, okay? Or you. Or you. You're going to be your own boss. You're going to set your own hours. There's not going to be anybody making profit off of you except you. You know, you can determine what you want to do. It's okay. That's how we're going to do it. And what we're going to do is have you act as systems administrators to provide good support to your customers. We're going to generate money from a monthly charge. Now, some of you may have tried selling computer services to your friends, your family, little companies and stuff. You wait for them to come to you with a broken computer, stuff like this. This is terrible. Because there may be 1 month where you've got all this work to do, and you're making money, but the next month nobody comes to you. And you don't have enough money to pay for your gasoline, your apartment, or to take your significant other out on a date. That, of course, is the most important thing, right? Taking your boyfriend or your girlfriend out on a date. That's the thing you have to pay for. So what we want to do is even this out. That basically you sell a contract to a very small business who then says, oh, I'm going to pay you the same amount every month, and you come in the same amount of time every month to do work for me and keep my computers alive. So the project itself is a nonprofit thing that helps you do this. Because you could do this by yourself. You don't need Project Kawa. You could do this by yourself. You don't need Project Kawa. But you'd be duplicating the same work that Project Kawa could do for you, and then you just use it. We create the business plan. You pull it down and use it. We create the marketing material. You pull it down and use it. We create the contract for the customer. You pull it down and use it. We create the products that you can sell or you use. We gather up the educational stuff. But even better yet, you all exchange ideas with each other. Because you're not in competition with each other. You help the other person come up with ideas, answer questions, and stuff like that. And we work as a community to provide better service to everybody. That $12.5 billion wasted every day might come down to only $2 billion wasted every day, and the other money goes into your pocket. So, we started, like I said, a number of years ago, and what we wanted to do was supply complete computer services for tall buildings and highly dense areas where you would buy all the equipment and then just rent computer services to people. We had a whole business plan for that, but it didn't work out. Then we said, well, we're going to create a home media center. And we made it very inexpensive. And you could sell that and services for it, but that didn't work out either. Then we said, and notice, this is version 1.0, this is version 0.5, this is version 0.1. We said, we'll take a Raspberry Pi, just put it on the back of an LCD monitor, making a very cheap system to access the internet. but that didn't work out either. And we were getting really discouraged. But then we came up with another idea, version 0.0. And this has to work because we can't go any lower. Maybe we're going to have negative numbers, you know, version negative 0.1. But here's the idea. We're going to target college students because there are some college students that even though the university charges no tuition, they can't afford to go to university. They can't afford the apartment, the food, they can't afford the transportation, and therefore they don't go to university. Or even if you do, maybe you could like a little extra cash in your pocket. Maybe you're already working at a job. Maybe you're already flipping hamburgers at McDonald's for 3.5 reais an hour. You can work at McDonald's, you just can't afford to eat at McDonald's. This is a job where you might be able to get 20 reais an hour or 25 reais an hour and guaranteed the money every month. In the short term, you're going to be generating money for the students to attend university. And they're also going to be doing the work which they're learning at the university. They're going to be applying their university knowledge to this job. There's only so much computer science you can spend in flipping hamburgers. The long-term goals remain the same. Eventually, we'd like to do version 0.1, 0.5, and 1.0. But we have to build up to that. Why are we going to target university students? Because you already have much of the knowledge to do this job. I know you're out there, you're going, oh, Mad Dog, I really don't know enough to sell my services to a small business. Yes, you do. You know how to open up a computer, you know how to install a new disk drive, you know how to install new software, you know how to get rid of viruses, you know how to set up a wireless network. Most of the people in small business can't even understand what I just said. All they know is their computer doesn't work or it's slow. So I have about 5 students that I'm working with. One of them told me, yes, Mad Dog, I worked with a slow computer. It turns out the person who installed the software had none of the device drivers that were specific to the hardware. They just used the generic device drivers that came with Microsoft. And the system was very slow. I went out to the net, I found the proper device drivers, I installed it, and the system came to life. My customer said, whoa, you saved me from having to buy a new computer. There's the value. That's why the customer was happy to pay them for the service. If you're working for your family, you say to yourself, I can't charge my mother and my father 100 reais an hour to do this work. I don't blame you. This is why we say, don't work for your family. Work for small business, because remember, business people understand that time is money. And if their computers aren't working the way they think they should, their employees are not coming into work. They're there, but they're really not there. They understand that. And Project Kawa would help you practice the skills that you're learning here at the university now. What types of services could you do? Like I said, installing new hardware, setting up the networking, removing viruses, doing backups. Ask a small business person, when was the last time you did a backup? Oh, it's just this morning. I had my car, I backed it into the parking space. What do you do for viruses? Chicken soup. Chicken soup. Great for viruses. You're much better than they are, okay? And you have to just go out and find them. You can give them courses in how to better use their software. Now here's the thing that's going to make Richard Stallman very angry at me. And because I'm a pragmatist, remember? I'm pragmatic. It means I live in the real world. This is not going to be just about free software. If your customer's using Windows, you help them with their Windows system. If their customer's using Apple, help them with Apple. If you don't have the skills, find somebody else who can. You hire them to help your customer. But when your customer has a new project, that's when you say, why don't you use free software to do it? And the money you would spend in buying the software can go into your pocket instead of having to pay it to Microsoft. The target market of this is the smallest of businesses. 86% of the business done in Brazil is done by small to medium business. Small business is 1 to 30 customers, medium is 30 to 300. 86%. 90% of the intellectual property, patents, innovations comes from these small companies. These are the people that you will be helping, the smallest of them, the doctors, the lawyers' offices, driving schools, things like that. You go out and find them, you give them the contract, they sign it, and they pay you money to go in and help them make their computer systems better. Now, if we're recommending 3 hours a week with each one of these customers. If you have 6 customers, that means you're spending 18 hours a week doing this job. It may mean that you have to cut back a little bit on the courses that you're taking at university. Instead of taking 6 courses, you might take 5 or 4. But you'll be earning money and getting experience as you go along. We think that's worth it, especially if the alternative is not going at all. And if you have these 5 companies, that means if you're charging 200 reais each month, you're making 1,000 reais a month for a part-time job. The benefits to the small business is that their computer systems are kept up to date and more likely actually working than not. And you can help them because if they need to buy new computers, you can go out to all of your other customers and say, let's buy a lot of these computers at one time and save money with discounts. You can be preventive in it. You can do the backup every week. So the most they're going to lose is a week's worth of stuff. You can train them how to do the backup every night, incremental backups. This is better. A lot of these people that say, well, I go out and I hire a skinny geek kid to help me. But the skinny geek kid may not have the background or the support that you would as a member of Project Kawa. How much training do you need for this? Minimal training. You've already got a lot of the technical skills you need. But we will show you on the website how to approach a customer. We'll give you the marketing materials. How much will this cost? The answer is nothing. In fact, you don't even have to log into the website to gather the information and pull it down. We're going to put that, anybody can pull that down and use it. But in order to call yourself a Project Kawa entrepreneur, you're going to have to log into the website and you're going to have to agree to a certain set of ethics to be able to say, I am a Project Kawa entrepreneur. And those ethics would be things like, you're going to limit yourself to a certain number of customers. You're going to continue with your college education. You're going to make sure that your customers are happy with what you're doing. And if you do all of that, then you can become a Project Kawa entrepreneur. You still don't have to pay any money. We're not going to charge you guys money for doing this. We're going to provide the business training and education that you need. The university can provide the technical knowledge that you need. We'll also provide you tools to help you. Bug tracking systems, customer relationship management systems, technical manuals and forums to exchange ideas. And over time, you're going to learn more and more skills that you can sell to your customers. So after you learn certain skills in systems administration, you can go in and say, hey, I can set up a database for you. I can set up a CRM system for you, my customer, and charge them for it. After you graduate, you could expand this business to being full-time if you want. I don't think you will want to do that. But the other thing you can do is to sell it to an incoming freshman and say, I have already a group of customers that you can take over, but you have to pay me money every month for a certain period of time. And you might get 5 or 6 or 7,000 reais or more from this new person taking over. And after a while, they stop paying you anything, and you take that money and start your next business. The benefits to the community is getting a greater number of students who can afford to go to university, and to be able to develop local high-tech jobs which can then attract new industry to this area. Without people who can provide good support, the industry will not come. And you allow small business to be more efficient with the way they use computers. The next steps to this, we're updating our website right now. We're putting the business and training materials out there. We're running a pilot right now in various cities, Sao Paulo and a couple of other cities, with a small number of entrepreneurs to make sure that they can do this work and we can give them the support they need. In the October timeframe, we plan on opening this up to anybody that wants to come to the site to do it. By the end of the year, we may have 10,000 entrepreneurs doing this work. That's when it gets really exciting. We have a board of directors that are made up mostly of Brazilians. We do have one person from Buenos Aires, Andrew Coletti, because after we get this working in Brazil, we're going to translate all the materials to Spanish and take it through the rest of the Latin American countries. We have another American besides myself. His name is Jody Newman. He is a lawyer in international telecommunications law. We felt we needed him to keep us out of trouble. We have a technical board that right now is small. You'll see that most of them are based on Debian. We happen to like that operating system. But there'll be more to come, and we would welcome people from Fedora or people from OpenSUSE. Here's the website, budgetcala.org. I will also say to you that I have an 8-year-old godson whose name is Kawa. It's just a coincidence. But Kawan is the Tupi Indian word for eagle, and our emblem is the eagle flying against the sun. The eagle is a very proud bird, very free, and the sun is a sign of purity. That's it. That's the end of my talk. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope to see you all as Project Kawa entrepreneurs.
Quem quiser fazer pergunta, pode fazer, e quem não souber inglês ou preferir, o professor Moacir vai traduzir. Pode fazer a pergunta em português mesmo.
We know there are a lot of people who are addicted to some kind of softwares like Microsoft Office. Like my parents, I don't think they could use another kind of office system. How do you untether these people to this kind of addiction?
I don't try. You know, in the early days of working with Linux, I tried to do that, okay? And, you know, in the early days of Linux, there was a different situation. You had Unix systems, like Sun Solaris running on Spark, that the hardware and the software was incredibly expensive. So by going to Intel with Linux, there was a huge cost savings right at the beginning. Plus, people were used to Unix, so the migration was not big. However, when it came down to taking people from Microsoft Intel to Microsoft Linux, the cost of the hardware was not as great, and the software was different, okay? So you didn't get the big cost savings, and there wasn't a huge savings in performance. So it became more difficult to get them to move off of one onto the other. Moving from Solaris to Intel, huge cost savings, and more applications than you could even get on Solaris. The movement of a group of people from a system that for them is working perfectly fine, they have all the licenses they need, their hardware is just as fast as they want it, everything is great, and you come in and say, oh, move to Linux because it's better. They spend all this time moving. They have all this pain in moving. They get there, they say, it's not any faster. I'm not saving any money. This is the all pain, no gain port. But now let's have a different thing. It's the end of the life for XP. They're going to have to move to Windows 7. Windows 7 doesn't work on their old crappy hardware which they have. They're going to have to buy new hardware. They're going to have to get new licenses for the old hardware that can run Windows 7. So there's going to be some training. It's going to be different. They may have to get new applications to go on top. The applications are different than the ones they're using. This is the time you install Linux on their machine and you call it Windows 7. You're laughing. When Vista came out, a friend of mine, his father kept saying, install Vista on my computer. Install Vista on my computer. So he went in and installed Ubuntu. He told his father it was Vista. After a couple of weeks, his father comes up to him and says, that Steve Jobs guy had better watch out because Bill Gates has really come up with a great operating system this time. He says, I think it's much better than Apple. A couple weeks later, hey, I've been telling all my friends about this great Vista that you installed on my computer, but you know, they don't seem to get the same results I do. So I said to my friend, when are you going to tell your father it's not Vista? He goes, maybe another 7 or 8 months. So if, or like I said, a new project, something they've never done before. Let's say your mother and father want to set up a web server for some reason. They've never set up a web server using Windows. Get them a small Linux box, put the web server on there, and let them go at it. Tell them it's from Microsoft. They won't know. Because they don't know how it's supposed to act. They have nothing to measure as to how different it is, right? But I don't tell people, jerk them across. If their system is unstable, if they have to spend a lot of money to upgrade, that's a time when they should consider it, okay? And there have been some case studies about people who have made massive migrations. The city of Munich, the State Bank of Turkey, who have made massive migrations and saved huge amounts of money. But those are unusual. So this is why I say that Project Kawa is not all about free software. If you have a customer who's using Windows, go in there and help them use Windows. But over time, you may be able to convert them over. Here's another way of doing it. Instead of using Internet Explorer, let them use Firefox. Okay? Instead of Windows, Microsoft SQL, let them use MySQL or Postgres. After a while, the only thing they're using from Microsoft is Microsoft itself. And then you pull that out from underneath of them. They won't even notice. Okay?
Okay.
Next question. Okay, I'll be around all day tomorrow if you have some questions. I know some people are a little shy. But come up to me, talk to me. I don't bite, okay? I may growl a little bit, but I don't bite. Thank you very much.